What do you think about capitalism? This is something that we asked people all over the world. We commissioned a poll now in 29 countries to find out what people think about capitalism. Later I will tell you some of the results of this poll. But maybe first I can ask you here in this room one question. If you hear the word capitalism, what do you associate? More positive terms, for example, economic freedom, prosperity, wide range of goods, or negative terms, for example, climate change, greed, corruption? Who associates more positive terms? And who's with more negative terms? So this is what I expected. And I wrote my book, of course, here, Students for Liberty, but later on, and I think this is also not a surprise for you, you will see that it's not representative for our survey all over the world, because most people don't share our view, you know this. My book with the title In Defense of Capitalism, that will be published in January in the United States, and by the way, in 27 other countries. We will publish it in 27 languages. This is not for anti-capitalists, because I'm sure they don't read a book like this. They prefer to buy book number 35, Why Capitalism is Evil, than only to touch one book In Defense of Capitalism. It's written for people like you who are pro-capitalist, but maybe you don't have all the arguments. For this book, I read 360 scientific books and scientific papers, and it has more than 900 footnotes to give you arguments to all this criticism against capitalism, and I will only mention some of this. Everyone had heard it before, capitalism is responsible for poverty and hunger. Fact is that 100 years ago, more than 90% of the worldwide population lived in extreme poverty. Even in the beginning of the 2000s, it was more than 40%. Today, it's less than 10%. Sometimes I have a lot of interviews all over the world, and sometimes I have only like 10 seconds time to tell people, or 15 seconds, why do you have this crazy t-shirt, I love capitalism? Today I don't have it, but I have this t-shirt, I love capitalism. And then my answer is only this, very short, but we will go more in detail. A lot of anti-capitalists, they don't know, they have no idea how people lived before capitalism. Maybe some of you know the amazing book from Johan Norberg, Progress. And he himself was an anti-capitalist when he was young. By the way, I was also anti-capitalist. I was very leftist when I was young. And he wrote he had no idea how people lived before capitalism. For him, it was more like a little bit a modern excursion to the countryside. This is how he imagined life before capitalism, but this is not true. Look at these facts. It's estimated that 200 years ago, 20% of people, even in England and in France, were not able to work longer than only too few hours because they were too weak to work longer than the 2 hours. This is what poverty means, the situation before capitalism. And when people hear the word famine, usually they associate Africa. The first thing you think about Africa, but it's not true. In the 20th century, 80% of the victims of famines were in socialist China and socialist Soviet Union. People don't know this. Some of the facts you'll find in my book, of course, are with its 900 footnotes. The next argument, this is chapter 2 in my book, is inequality. What is with inequality? Some people are more concerned about inequality than about poverty. And then I take always the example of China. Of course, equality, the people were more equal in socialist times in China. But I was several times in China and had their presentation. I found no one who told me, let's go back to Mao's time because we were more equal in this time. Of course, they were more equal, but a lot of people lived in poverty. And I have here one very interesting graph. Look here, 1981. 88% of the people in China lived in extreme poverty. 88%. Today it's less than 1%. How did it happen? Very easy. Deng Xiaoping introduced pro-market reforms, introduced private property, and the situation became better. Of course, not in a political sense. It's a one-party system, a dictatorship. But it became better. Why? Because of pro-market reforms. Unfortunately, in the last years, they forgot why they were so successful, and the way goes back to more state. And this will be very, very bad for China. In my book, I have also an essay and paper from a friend of mine. He's from Beijing University. His name is Wang Chang. And he's a libertarian, as we are. And I'm in contact with him, and the situation becomes worse and worse for them. At the same time, the number of billionaires increased in China. You know, in Mao's time, there was not a single billionaire in China. Maybe there was one millionaire, Mao. I don't know whether there was a millionaire. Maybe because everyone had to buy his red book. I had this red book when I was young. I believed in it, but not today. And why is this so important? I give you the same graphic or similar graphic here for the whole world. You see here that the number of billionaires increased. In 2000, there were about 500 billionaires all over the world. Today, it's around 2,800. So number of billionaires increased, but the number of people who live in poverty decreased at the same time. Decreased. Why is this so important? Because it's the proof that zero-sum thinking is wrong. This is a core belief of all socialists, zero-sum thinking. They think the rich are only rich because they have taken it away from the poor. But if this would be true, how to explain such a graph? Show it to a socialist who believes in zero-sum thinking and ask him, how is it possible that rich people only become rich because they take it away from the poor, when at the same time the number of rich people increased and the number of poor people decreased? Impossible. So this is why zero-sum thinking is wrong. Here's Nobel Prize winner Zietelmann, a quote, "Better world makes for a world of differences. Escapes makes for inequality," because the situation does not improve for all people at the same time in the beginning. That was what Deng Xiaoping said in China sometimes, that some people become rich first. Some people start to become rich, and then the situation improves for more and more people. I was in Vietnam now, by the way, for 11 days. They call themselves socialists, but I found here in the United States and Europe more Marxists than I found in Vietnam. No one believes they're in Marxism, in spite of the fact that they call themselves communists and socialists, but they believe in capitalism there. And the same story, do you know this? Vietnam was the poorest country in the world in 1990, the poorest country in the world, poorer than African countries. 80% lived in poverty. Today it's less than 5%. Why? Because 1986 they started their so-called doi moi reforms, pro-market reforms, always the same story. Inequality. I can recommend you this great book from Walter Scheidel, The Great Leveler. It's research how inequality was reduced in history. And there were 4 main reasons: war, revolution, state failure, and plague. It has all something to do with violence. Inequality was reduced with violence. Even Thomas Piketty, you know, the French economist, left-wing economist, he wrote in his book, The Capital in the 21st Century, that the biggest reduction of inequality was during World War I and World War II. These were the great levelers. You have to know, when you want to speak about reduction of inequality, what does it mean? In reality, inequality was reduced by violent shocks, as Walter Scheidel says. On the other hand, prosperity came with peaceful capitalist reforms. There's a difference. Today, everyone speaks about climate change. environmental destruction. This is the main argument from anti-capitalists today. You know the slogan, system change, not climate change. And I have here a very interesting statistic. Who of you knows the Index of Economic Freedom from Heritage Foundation, for example? Okay, most of you know this. And who of you know the Environmental Performance Index from Yale University? Not so many. But if you compare both, you see here's the numbers. They have calculated from the Heritage Foundation that in the countries that are economically free, the environmental performance index score is much higher than in the countries that are economically unfree. This is a fact. And I have an example here from, you hear it with my German accent. I come from Germany, from Berlin. And here you see, when we speak today about CO2 emissions, you see the numbers for East Germany and for West Germany. And if we adjust it to each unit of GDP, then CO2 emissions were 3 times higher in East Germany and West Germany. Why is this important? Because when people tell me the reason for climate change, the reason for environmental problems are these private capitalist companies that look for profit. But where were these private capitalist companies in East Germany? There were none of them. This was owned by the state. By the way, you can see some more of these facts. I produced a film together with a free-to-choose network. If you Google it, you can find it on the internet, Life Behind the Berlin Wall. And you find a lot of facts there, facts like this, for example, about environmental destruction. Here, another numbers. Airborne pollutants in East and West Germany, some of them were 10 times higher in East Germany and West Germany. So it's nonsense to blame capitalism for environmental problems. The country that abolished capitalism was the country where the most environmental problems, not only in East Germany. It was worse than in Soviet Union, for example. But then you hear another argument. You hear resources are limited all over the world, and so unlimited growth as capitalism promises is not possible. Sounds very logical. Everyone has had. Yes, sounds logical. But it's not as logical as it sounds, because growth doesn't mean always that we need more resources. It was this way maybe 30 or 40 years ago, but today we have a different development. I have here only one example, the iPhone. It's not all devices. Someone calculated to something like 30 devices that you have now all is this iPhone. What do you think, how many resources and how many energy you needed for all these different devices and how many you need for this? The same with when I was young, I had a lot of records at my home to hear music. Today and then later on I bought the smaller one, the CD. Today you can load it up and you don't need so many resources for this. Or books. I'm old-fashioned. I have some thousands of books at home, but my father is 93 years old. And even he is more up-to-date than I because he has his Kindle. Need not so much resources. These are only some examples why it sounds logical. Resources are limited, growth can't be unlimited, and so capitalism is evil. But it's not as easy as it sounds. I told you about the poll. We asked people not only do you like capitalism or not, I tell you later, I show you later, we confronted them with 34 different statements about capitalism, 34 different statements. And the statement that was supported by most of the people in every country, the negative statement about capitalism was this statement: capitalism is dominated by the rich. They set the political agenda. But if it would be so easy that money can buy political power, Donald Trump would never have president of the United States. Here you see the numbers. He raised a lot of money, 600 million. But Hillary raised 1.2 billion, twice than him. If money could buy political power, president from the United States would have been Hillary Clinton, not Donald Trump. And as to September 2016, not a single Fortune 100 CEO had donated to Trump's campaign. Only later on, some switched to his side. And President of the United States would have been not Joe Biden if money can buy political power. It's him, Michael Bloomberg, because at the time of the election, he was the 8th richest man in the world with a net worth of $62 billion. And he spent $1 billion in 3 months. Never someone did it before. Result, nothing. It's not so easy. Of course, you need money if you run for president. But it's not like anti-capitalists tell us that it's so easy that money can buy political power. Here I have very interesting research from Larry M. Bartels. He's not a pro-capitalist like I am. He's more left-leaning political scientist, but he made this analysis about 16 presidential election campaigns from 1952 to 2012. And his result was that only in 2 of them, money made the difference. And then if you add the last 2 elections, the result is that in 64 years, only in 2 out of 17 elections, unequal campaign spending was a decisive factor. These are facts. You can find them all with footnotes in the book. Unfortunately, it's not published right now, but it will be published in January with Republic Book Publishers. They will publish it. And here, this is a paper quoted in every single book, every single paper about this topic. I don't know why, but it was one research about perceived importance of problems facing the United States. And they asked rich people, what are your priorities? And you see, what was their first priority? Budget deficits. And do you see what was here? The last priority, climate change. Now the good thing is, now we have 10 years later. And what happened with the budget deficit? Were the wishes of the rich people fulfilled by Obama or by Donald Trump or by Joe Biden? No. No. At the time of the survey, the deficit was 100% of GDP, and today it's 133%. So it was not, maybe they wished this according to this survey, but it's not the way that they can dictate the policy. This is nonsense. Of course, there is corruption. Of course, money plays a too big role. But if you want to limit this, you have to separate more the politics from the economy, as libertarians want this. The more regulation you have, the more regulation, the more possibilities or reasons, for example, to bribe people or give them money. I was in Georgia, not here in the United States, but East Germany, Georgia, some months ago. And they had a lot of corruption there. And then they reduced corruption. I asked them, how did you do it? He told me 2 things. First, we fired all of 31,000 policemen from one day to the other. There were not more criminality because these were the worst criminals. So nothing bad happened. So the next thing, we got rid of a lot of regulations, because at the moment you get rid of a lot of regulations, people don't have so much reasons to bribe someone. So get rid of regulations. This is the best thing to fight corruption. Then I hear always the argument, capitalism is responsible for monopolies. Here, look at this headline. 2007, will MySpace ever lose its monopoly? The younger people will not know what is this MySpace, never heard about it. Or here, this was the same year. Forbes, 1 billion customers. Can anyone catch the cell phone king? Nokia. I had a Nokia at this time. So monopolies, they look very much more powerful when they are on the top of the power than they are in reality. Look here, this was one of the most powerful monopolies, Xerox. 95% market share. Today it's 2%. Or Kodak, maybe you remember, 90% US film market share. Got bankrupt later. All these monopolies where people think they will last forever. Now, today they think the same about Facebook, Google, Amazon. It's always. If they are on the height of their power, they think they will last forever. But what is the enemy of monopolies? Were they abolished by the government or by antitrust legislation? No. The biggest enemy for monopolies is capitalism. So and even I don't understand the left-leaning people. They are against monopolies, and at the same time, 5 minutes later, they are for nationalization, what means the ultimate monopoly, the monopoly by the state. I think it's a little bit crazy. First to say how bad are monopolies in capitalism, and then to tell, okay, but I'm for nationalization, what means the absolute monopoly by the state. I promised you to give you some of the results of this survey. First, we asked the people, or we presented them some statements about free market without using the word capitalism. Because, you know, every one of you knows, capitalism has a bad connotation for a lot of people. And we wanted to find out how much has it to do with the word and how much has it to do with what the word means, actually means. And so we didn't use the word capitalism, but we described what it is. Here's the result. Only in 7, now we have done it in some more countries, now it's 29 countries. Only in 7 out of 29 countries, people had a positive attitude toward economic freedom. So this means it's unfortunately not only the word. Some people think change the word and then people will love capitalism. If it would be so easy, but it isn't. It isn't. Then we had a lot of other questions. For example, an association test where we presented 10 different terms for capitalism. What do we associate with capitalism? What I asked you before, prosperity or greed or whatever. And we asked them 18 different questions about capitalism. And the result, here you see the overall index about whether people like capitalism or not. The most positive attitude towards capitalism have people in Poland, number 1. I've been in Poland several times this year. There are a lot of people who haven't forgotten what socialism means. And number here, by the way, here also in the Czech Republic. Even in the United States, of course, there's a difference between young and old people. Older people much more in favor of capitalism. Younger people, you know, much more critical if it is about capitalism. And here you have all these anti-capitalist countries, especially France. I love them so much because my books are published all over the world. There's only one country, none of my 27 books was published in France. They hate capitalism so much that they even don't publish my books. So this is, we had another survey about envy, how envious are people against rich people. This was another survey. And by the way, in France, people were most envious all over the world. In Japan, were least envious. This is here, by the way, the impact that the world capitalism has. I told you before that, of course, support for capitalism increases in most of the countries when you don't use the word. And here's the last thing. Today, people speak a lot about conspiracy theories, and in most cases, they speak about right-wing conspiracy theories. And of course, there are. I think you know some of them, crazy conspiracy theorists, right-wing with QAnon and all this crazy stuff here in the United States. But it's never mentioned that anti-capitalists are conspiracy theorists. And here I prove it now in my book. We confronted our respondents with 2 statements that are typical for conspiracy theorists. You can see them here. In reality, politicians don't decide anything. They are puppets controlled by powerful forces in the background. The lobbyists, the super rich, for example. or a lot of things in politics can only be properly understood if you know that there's a larger plan behind them, something that most people, however, do not know, but I know this all, what it is about. And then we saw whether pro or anti-capitalists supported these statements. And here the result. Don't look for the difference between the countries. This is not important with the graphs. Look at the difference between the left dark bar and the right bright bar. The left bar are the anti-capitalists. The bright bar, the pro-capitalists. And you see that in each country, anti-capitalists are more in favor to conspiracy theory than pro-capitalists. There's only one country where the difference is very small. And this is your country, the United States. You can find it here. Even in the United States, we have more anti-capitalists who are pro-conspiracy theories than anti-capitalists, but the difference is not very huge. We have also a number of pro-capitalists, maybe some Trump supporters who said Trump is great and I believe in conspiracy theories, but I also believe in capitalism. I don't know. But the difference is not so big in the United States as it is in other countries. But this is my proof. If you speak about conspiracy theories, you see it's in left-leaning media like CNN. They speak a lot about conspiracy theories, but at the same time, they are conspiracy theorists because they speak always about the super rich and the lobbyists that allegedly control everything. So this is unfortunately not available now, but in January, in defense of capitalism. And yes, I think we have a few minutes time, hopefully. So if you have one or two questions, I appreciate it. And first, thank you for coming here and listening. Yes?
Well, conspiracy theories have been an interesting thing that I've discussed a lot. And it seems like, it was a conspiracy theory that the government was spying on most Americans and stuff. And that was a conspiracy theory for many years. And then we find out, oh, it's true. It was only the fact that there wasn't that much evidence to support that idea. And then we find out that the NSA, in fact, is spying on a lot of Americans.
I admit, if you have 1,000 conspiracy theories, there will be one that is correct. I admit. but my experience, most people that tell me that story are conspiracy theorists. Maybe you're not, but you're the exception. I know.
When does the evidence become so strong that it's not a conspiracy theory, but it's an actual theory? At what point?
Okay.
My question is more about the environmental side.
Yes.
Spoke about the growth and for example, I'm sure you know Greta Thunberg,
yes.
she's kind of the main advocate of like anti-growth and restricting capitalism and saving the environment. But what would you say to the people who are so kind of taken in by this argument, by this narrative, that to them it's not even, maybe they don't realize themselves, but they're prepared to give up their, let's say, first world quality of life, and they're prepared to maybe scale back their quality of life in the name of like saving the world.
Absolutely. I would recommend them, please go to Africa, please go to Asia, please go to Vietnam and tell these people your degrowth story and find out what they think about it. Tell them we have to degrowth now. They are very happy that they escaped poverty. And now, of course, if you live here very comfortable life, we have here like Greta Thunberg, or we have also in Germany, we have a lot of them, more than I think in every other country in the world. And we have the craziest energy policy in the world in Germany, and will bring us now in big problems. And there are some rich kids who have these ideas. Of course, you can do it, reduce everything that you like. But then if you tell your story about degrowth, please go to Africa and tell those people. Please go to China and tell them, no, you have to stop now. You have to degrowth. It's not possible. And I think it is planned economy. For example, I read the book from Naomi Klein about capitalism versus climate change. And her suggestions how to solve the problem. This was all sounds for me like a planned economy. And planned economy never solved any problem in the world, on the contrary. And I think it's a serious problem. I'm not some of the people who don't believe in that there are these problems with climate and so, but if you never solved a problem in history with planned economy, but you made everything worse, why do you expect now the first time to solve a problem? You will make things worse. And you will see it in Germany now. Wait some month, what happens now in Germany? We started with this energy policy, and there was a great article in Wall Street Journal. The headline was the dumbest energy policy in the world. 3 years ago, it was about Germany. And now we see the results. It's a total disaster what they did there. And this is what I mean. This is what politics did. They made the decision to phase down nuclear power plants in spite of the fact that they are much better in relation to the topic of climate change than coal power plants, for example. But it was their decision. It was not any capitalist. They wanted to have this nuclear power plants. But the government decided, and you have it very often, that government makes things worse than makes things better. Yes?
What do you think is the best argument against capitalism? The most convincing?
The most convincing argument is if you have a perfect utopia idea how a society should look, and then you compare it with real life. This is what socialists do. But I think it's not really fair. It's the same if you, do you have a girlfriend?
No.
No, you have not. Who is married here in the room? You are married. So if your wife comes this evening to you, that we have to talk. Oh, yes, about divorce. Why? She started to read these romantic love novels. And then she compared your marriage with these romantic love novels. What would you say? It's not really fair. Please compare our marriage with this of our friends. That is not so bad. Maybe it's really good. But don't compare it with this. And this is what they do. And I think it's kind of crazy to do this, to compare it. But this is what socialists do. And maybe another argument, they will tell you, okay, don't tell me anything about socialism. This is not what I want. I have another idea how real socialism is, because all this was not real socialism after it failed. It's the same. Give you a funny story. Maybe we have 2 minutes for a funny story. Imagine a housewife bakes a cake. She invites some guests Saturday, but guests get sick, even they have to vomit. She understands, okay, something was not correct with the recipe. I have to make some slight modifications for next Saturday. She bakes a new cake, invites guests. Guests get sick again, have to vomit. Oh, something's wrong with the recipe. I understood. I think I have to change something. But she took the same recipe with some slight modification. Next Saturday, invites guests. You can guess what happens. They get sick again, and they vomit. And then she does this 24 times. You will tell me now, this is a crazy story. There is no housewife in the world crazy as this. You are correct, but this is exactly what socialists do. This is what they did. They tried it in every single different way. In Cuba, in another version than in North Korea. In Vietnam, in another version than in East Germany. In China, in another version than in Bulgaria. And they failed all times without any exception. The same as with a housewife. So I think this is, I can recommend you one book. This is not published. I wrote another book, The Power of Capitalism, with the title. You can find it on Amazon. And there I compared only things that you can compare. Chile, Venezuela, North, South Korea, China to Mao's time, China today, East, West Germany. And I don't like any discussion with socialists when they tell me about their theory and about their books. I say, no, please, let's talk about history, because socialism looks always good on paper, with the exception when the paper is in the history book. Okay, thank you.